It's showtime. Showtime, Kevin.
We're
Are
live.
you ready?
Doing it
We're
live.
ready. All right, we're live. Welcome, everyone, to Location, The Reason We Learn. But this is the Engineering Reason podcast and live stream. I'm here, your host, Deb Philman, with my co-host, Kevin from Engineering Politics.
Hey, you guys doing?
Glad you're here. All right, we have got a good show for you tonight, I think, because we're going to talk union stuff, aren't we?
Yes. Well, first of all, I think we both agree that we like unions and we want them to be everywhere. I don't know why Walmart hasn't started a union yet, because they'd be so much better if they did. So I want to start there. Didn't Ayn Rand write a book about pro-union? I don't know.
Yeah, I can't even with the straight face on that one. No, I can't. No, there's a limit to okay. So what do we know? What's going on lately with the teachers union, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have dove into unions and just their general applicability before, but then there's the idea of a private sector union and there's the idea of a public sector union and how those are inherently different and how we should treat and look at them differently. But the case has just grown in the last week because the two major teachers unions in America have both come out, and that's the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, and the National Education Association, NEA, are showing strong support for critical race theory and anti-racism.
Wait, Kevin. We're not. No, critical race theory is not a thing. They're not doing it in schools. What's to support? I'm confused.
What happened in the last month or so where they actually kind of came out and prior to a month, they're like, this doesn't exist. I don't know where you're finding this stuff. These books written by all these academics, they don't exist. We don't think. They're not being sold all over Amazon, now being pushed. I just got another email because I subscribe to Audible. And they have a 2-for-1 deal, and one of them's Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility.
Oh, but that's not critical race theory. That's this other thing.
Well, it's not. So something I do want to get in with you later is the difference between anti-racism and CRT, because I think there actually is a difference there, and it's an important distinction. But I think we'll get through it naturally here. But both of them come out and show the support for CRT and anti-racism in schools, and by schools. Although another comment I'll get to later by Randy Weingarten, in these schools, we're not talking about universities. We're talking about high schools, grade schools, very, very young education.
Yep.
You and I have both seen the books, the way they push this propaganda through picture books now, the way they push the propaganda through, Blue's Clues and children's shows and Sesame Street and all this stuff. It's already being pushed.
Netflix has a new one, We the People.
Yeah, it's being pushed by every institution. It was already under the radar, unofficially being pushed by public schools, but now it's just officially. Now they've come out in the last week. It's official. CRT is magically a thing now. It went from not existing to being around for decades.
To how dare you not let us teach it?
Yeah, and so now they're just out in the open. So the AFT president Randy Weingarten said, when defending against teachers who are going to teach this, even in several states that have already banned it, and several more states that are on their way to banning it. She said, "Mark my words, our union will defend any member who gets in trouble for teaching honest history." That's how they brand it, right? Honest history. What was it during the debate? It was diversity training or something like that when Trump cited
sensitivity
CRT. Sensitivity training. Even worse. So
the funny thing is, it's actually true. We want to teach you to be hypersensitive to every little perceived insult. Anyway, continue.
Well, sensitive to the stuff we deem that you should be sensitive toward. Because what happens to the conservative group is I'm sensitive that you're teaching my kid this stuff. That sensitivity doesn't count. But
that's your fragility talking.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we'll do that the next episode, I'm sure. So what she's doing here is they are pledging the AFTs to add another $2.5 million to an already existing legal defense fund for teachers who break the law teaching CRT. This, as we just talked about before, this is like a police union saying, no, we're going to beat people if they look suspicious because, it's the law that we can't do that, but let's just build a legal defense fund and, get out of it. That is what the teachers unions are doing.
Yeah.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane. Yeah. You should go to your school board and be like, you cannot teach this stuff. This is, especially if it's in your state that you're pushing.
If you got time to kill, I'd spend that time personally figuring out homeschool, but that's me. I'm a weirdo that way.
Right. We'll get there. Don't worry. We'll definitely get there. And just a
Yeah.
quick aside to the AFT, claiming to defend this stuff. They also have Ibram X. Kendi, who's slated to speak at the AFT sponsored Teach conference this week. So that'll be exciting. I'm sure he'll do his normal.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy's he's something else. I have respect. Not respect. Respect is the wrong word, but I at least understand the credibility of some of the larger names, the Kimberly Crenshaws, the Derek Bells. Like, these people at least have a bit of horsepower to back up their claims. Ibram Kendi is just like, the guy is absent of any relevant thoughts. You read his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. It contradicts itself every other sentence. Like, it's amazing how this guy's got credibility. But again, I think I'll get to him later when we talk about him in the mix with all these other CRT types. So also the NEA passed a resolution pledging, and they put this on their website, the agenda of this resolution. And then I think they took it off their website because I couldn't find it there anymore after all these publications reported on what they said in this agenda. So this is what the agenda said. I'm going to share and publicize information already available on critical race theory, and to provide an already created in-depth study that critiques empire, white supremacy, anti-blackness, anti-indigeneity, racism, patriarchy, cis-heteropatriarchy, capitalism, ableism, anthropocentrism.
I think you were supposed to not be like judging humans better than animals, maybe.
Yes. Yeah. So I had to research what that meant. And I'm like, is this like, I'm on team people, and I don't know why, I don't, is this the way to make everyone vegan? I'm not sure, and all these other forms of
except bugs are okay. We can eat bugs.
Well, at a certain point,
because they're ugly, so we can eat them, not the cute animals. Right. It's not the cute ones.
But they consider all these forms of power and oppression that intersect in our society. Right. And when you go through that list, I hate white supremacy. I hate anti-blackness. I hate racism. When the patriarchy exists, I kind of hate that too, I guess, how you define it. But I always cue in, and whenever in the list they just randomly throw capitalism, which is something that is overtly good. Like,
thing you hate, capitalism. Yeah. Da, 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 da. Wait, what?
It is inherent. Like, none of these things are inherently good, like, in any way. Most of them are actually bad, depending on how you define them. Capitalism is just inherently good. It's the reason we got here. The reason the NEA built a website is because of capitalism. Half these people are reading this on their iPhone and are like, yeah, take down that, research that capitalism. It's been putting everyone down. And it's just mind-blowing to me when they throw that in the list.
Well, that's a little thing we call, neurolinguistic programming. Yeah. So they don't do anything by accident. Everything they do is intentional. When I say they, of course, the people who are trying to manipulate you using words, and the union's no different. So everything they just listed there, as you said, is designed to trigger you on, to say, yeah. And you just maybe didn't notice that capitalism was thrown in. And unless you're a person who already hates it, in which case you're happy. So, it's just a way to reach a wide swath of people. And then to have the people who want to say, but wait a second, I kind of like that capitalism thing. And then they'll tell you that it's tied to all that other stuff you just said you hated.
Well, it's the intersection word.
Right. And now they're going to make you defend it as if defending it is defending all those other things, because they put it in it's on our list. Yeah, but it doesn't belong on but it's on our list. So if you like it, that means you must like these other things because it's intersectional. See? Oh, yeah. So it's all very clever gamesmanship. And unfortunately, a lot of people are falling for it. And I'm realizing that more and more people than I ever thought possible are mostly motivated by what other people think of them. Mysterious other people, like other people they might not even like or respect or, care about. But for some reason, other people thinking I'm a good person by somebody's definition. And it's really not new. I mean, what motivated every other, like, let's say, panic or hysteria? It's all the same thing. Human beings, I guess, are sort of hardwired to do this. And this is just, I guess, our turn, for this generation. But it's very scary to me because kids are caught in the balance. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we were caught in the battle. I don't want to die. Like, I don't want people to come to my door and take my stuff and, that kind of thing. But at the same time, it makes me angry because I feel like we were tasked, every subsequent generation from 1776 on, tasked with preserving liberty, and we failed. We just straight up failed. And when I think about how long people have seen this coming, it makes me mad. It makes me really angry because I feel like I can't give to my kids what I believe is their birthright, and their birthright is liberty.
Yeah. Did you have a chance to watch that interview with Jordan Peterson and Yeonmi Park?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one. If any of you watching this have not watched that, I dare you to watch it and not like start sobbing at like 8 different points. Mm-hmm. Because that was amazing. Also, I think she has started a locals community. So,
oh really? Oh great.
Yeah. I just joined it.
Yeah, but today, Columbia University is my grandfather's alma mater. My grandfather went there, and not for college. He went for law school, but still, I mean, I can't imagine surviving what she survived, and then only to show up at Columbia and be like, yeah, I don't feel free anymore. So,
or to like finally, I mean, you talk about someone who grew up. She wouldn't like, she found freedom. Like she found freedom by trying to just look for basic food. She didn't understand freedom. I mean, when you live, I mean, we kind of have the same problem in our society now that people who grow up in America don't know freedom either. They just want to give it away because they just see it as responsibility. Yeah. Where she, through all of this hardship, finds freedom, becomes successful, comes to the bastion of freedom that is America, goes to an American institution, which has always been held up, in super high regard, and then realizes, hey, these guys are trending in the direction of the people where I came from.
Right.
Like, how disheartening does that have to be?
Right.
And, these people trying to institutionalize this stuff in even lower education, because Randy Weingarten came out and her claim is that we don't teach CRT in the younger classes because it is it's a legal theory, so we're not going to teach it in there. But the anti-racism is just a derivation of CRT, so they're teaching it in there for sure. And
do you want to talk about that for the audience at this point? Do you want to talk about how they're different or how they're the same? Or?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I mean, unless you have any comments on that.
No, but I mean, it's interesting because what Randy Weingarten is saying, and then what name escapes me, the NEA chick. What is her name?
Something Pringle.
Thank you.
Becky Pringle.
Yes. It's like they're saying different things in a way, because the NEA is much more hardcore right now on this and explicit as far as like, oh yeah, we're all in on this. We're just all in. And, Randy seems to be still trying to have it both ways. And I don't know if it's because she claims to be a history teacher or a social studies teacher. I don't know what she claims to be, but I think she's still kind of lagging behind by like a week in terms of her, enthusiastic support of, at every grade, at every level, we're doing this. She wants to defend teachers, and she's still calling it true history, whereas Pringle and the NEA are like calling it CRT. They're just straight up calling it that, and they're not making any distinction by grade. So that's the difference. In case anybody gets confused, these two major unions, NEA is bigger than the AFT. Together they, make a country, but a large country. And the other thing people don't necessarily realize is that when you join a local state association, because these two unions are not necessarily the union in charge in every single state. And not every teacher association in every state has collective bargaining power. They're an association and they represent their members and they collect dues and they are lobbying and all these things, but they don't necessarily get a seat at the table to negotiate, contracts the same way. And so it doesn't mean they can't strike. It just means they have different power to leverage. But what a lot of people don't get is that notwithstanding, if you join your local association in many, many states, you are automatically also a member of the bigger union. They have an affiliation. And that means you have access to their trainings and access to a lot of their support and, all the kinds of material they want you to have, the sort of political stuff. And in some cases, they're even going after people in graduate school. So like, or in college, pre-service teachers. They're, getting them to join and if you join and you get this access to all these unions. So if you're under the impression that you don't have a teachers union in your state, you're wrong. You do. It's just called a teacher association. And just because they don't have collective bargaining power doesn't mean you don't have a union. You do have a union. There's not a state that I know of that is literally teacher union free where the teachers are all independent contractors. It's just, they may be in terms of who hires them, but they have an association lobbying for them and helping to put people in the school board and helping to make sure the governor knows who to pick to be on the Board of Education and so forth. So they have a lot of political power, no matter what state you're in. Okay. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that, because I have people coming at me going, we don't have a teachers union in my state. I'm like, yeah, you do. So there's that. That was all I had to add to the education about how unions work.
Yeah, I know probably compared to you relatively little about how the intricacies of the actual teachers unions and how they operate. But just to add a little aside onto what I believe it's NEA is doing, they're also investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in what's effectively going to be political opposition research against the people who are trying to expose them for CRT.
Right.
And
they've already been. They've already been very effective. I want the audience to understand this, that even before they've spent a nickel directly focusing on this opposition research and, marketing or whatever, just by virtue of the fact that the mainstream media is sort of in the tank for the unions, the current administration is very tight with the unions, just because of those things, they have set the narrative, dominated the, sort of airtime with the narrative that the only people opposed to critical race theory or any of its offshoots, critical pedagogy in general, in our K-12 institutions or state schools, state colleges and universities, are right-wing, hard-leaning conservative propagandists who are being sneaky and lying, like they're attributing a lot of malice to it, that it's purely political and it's purely right-wing, extremism. So they're not just saying only Republicans oppose it. They're not just saying only right-wing people oppose it. They're saying, everybody who opposes it is effectively evil, like a really, really bad person who is a sneaky, lying, underhanded, nasty racist who just wants American children to be denied the truth. And it's working. I'm sorry to tell you this because it breaks my heart, but it's not working with those of us who are probably sitting here watching this right now, who came here to watch this, or, who are already dialed in and already opposed to it. Obviously it's not working. You're looking at it and going, I'm not a right winger, I'm a liberal or whatever. But, it with the people who have just kind of surface understanding that something's not quite right. And I'm mad that they're still making my kid wear a mask in school. That level of involvement, it is working with them. They hear something CRT and they started to go, wait, that sounds kind of bad. Oh, the people who oppose it or telling you it's bad, they're all those people you don't want to be. So if we have, let's say, 45% of the population, maybe bigger, who operate in this whole, I don't want anyone to mistake me for an evil Republican. I'm going to continue to wear a mask because someone might think I'm not a liberal. Okay. If you have a large percentage of people who fall into that category, it's probably not 45%, but it's a large chunk.
Yeah.
They're very receptive to, here's another way you can designate that you're not one of those people. Be pro CRT. Okay. So even if you don't know anything about it, go be for it and join us with our talking points and our all this. They'd call it pointing fingers and calling them evil extremists, right wing, white supremacists, etc., because that's the only people who are opposed to this. And I didn't think it would work because so many of the outspoken people against what's actually transpiring in the classroom are not Republicans. They're very clearly not. In fact, people who are Republicans and right-leaning are extremely slow to arrive at this party. It's almost like Yeah, what do you mean? We've always been against that. Like they sort of were already in a position of we don't like indoctrination in schools, so they didn't think they had to do anything different. Whereas the classical liberals, centrists, left or of center type of people are going, wait, what? I'm sorry, what? Wait, what? You're telling my kid what? And I would even go so far as to say it's the majority. I would say the majority of people who are showing up to these meetings and saying this is for the birds are not far right wing conservatives by any stretch of the imagination. They're classically liberal, and recognizing this, the illiberalism in this, and speaking out, and they're being smeared. Well, you and I wouldn't call it a smear to be told that you're, right or something, or Republican or right wing. Although I do think it's a smear to say somebody's white supremacist, but they're being smeared. It's this organized smear campaign, and as you just pointed out, they're committing $56 million or something. No, 1,000. How many is it? 1,000
to the opposition research?
Yeah, I think it's 1,000. I think it's like 50.
It's in the thousands. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like 50,000 or something dollars to research this opposition. And the rhetoric is that it's an organized campaign by bad people, and that's it.
Yeah, I think $127,000 is what the NEA is going to.
Is that about to put it into the system, or is that the research?
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's research. I'll have to read through it later.
All told, the bottom line is that they're committing a not insignificant sum. It's not huge money, but it's money. I mean, whoever's going to get paid that amount is getting paid a fair amount of money to do research that really isn't going to be hard to do. If you think about it, it's not like Chris Rufo is hiding in the shadows.
It's one person on a computer just pointing at, hey, racist.
That's all it is. It's really just paying a bunch of trolls. In my opinion, what they're going to call research, since it all is out in the open, is going to be a bunch of people to go on social media and sit there and get videos, whatever, and then make memes and do all kinds of things to frame. It's all going to be a framing project where they frame Chris Rufo and James Lindsay and, who knows, maybe people like me, I don't know, frame us as like the worst, most evil people and, whatever. So, and then it's it's already working to a certain degree on people we need to reach, we need to wake up. It's never going to work on the people who are already against it.
Right.
But in terms of stopping the momentum, I think it has a good chance of working, the smear campaign.
Yeah.
And so, if you're watching this and you know anybody who is on the tip, is like, tipping over, please make them aware that it is an organized smear campaign. And it bears no resemblance to reality. Chris Rufo is not a right-wing conservative. And neither is James Lindsay. Neither are any of the people who are really hard line opposed to this. They are classical liberals, and they make that abundantly clear in all their writing. All you have to do is go to the source. So even if you don't trust me or you don't trust Kevin, go to these people's websites, Chris or James or any of these people, and read their own writing. Read what they have to say. Don't take something directly from the union. Remember, the union has an agenda, and it's to continue to run the schools. And that's one last thing I want to say as far as union education is, people were telling me today on Twitter, oh, well, they don't really have that kind of power, or teachers don't have that kind of power. Yes, they do. They do, and here's why. They have deep pockets because they collect dues, and nobody is required to join the union anymore. That Supreme Court, made that very clear. But most people do. The vast majority of teachers, peer pressure, and a lot of other things do join the union. They pay their dues. Those dues become a giant, war chest for political lobbying. Okay. They don't actually do a great job of representing their teachers in terms of salary and things like that. They use most of the money for politics. They help school board candidates get elected. They fund campaigns for union-friendly school board candidates. They fund campaigns for school teacher union-friendly candidates for public office, from mayor to city council person to, you name it. They will give a lot to candidates who promise to be loyal to them. And of course, Joe Biden is no exception. So, when you have them giving so much money to these politicians who then in turn control the money that goes to schools, it's like a big circle. And if you are an administrator and you are not friendly to the union will go to the school board they helped get elected and say, this guy's got to go or this woman's got to go. And they will start pressuring and say, you're not going to get reelected, or we're going to make things hard for you. And, they exert pressure, and that administrator is likely to lose their job. So it's all the same tactics used by private sector unions of sort of intimidation and lobbying and political pressure and money come to bear in this public sector union. And as you mentioned at the outset, I personally think that public sector unions should be illegal. I think they're unconstitutional. I think it is insane that we are, first of all, compelled to pay our taxes for this system, this public school system. We don't have a choice. We can't say no. And then we pay the taxes to pay for, amongst other things, the teachers, their salaries, and they then take their money. The money's fungible. It's not like they have a separate little pot of money they got from somewhere else. And they pay dues to an organization that is actively working against the interests of the taxpayers. It's outside of our democracy. It's like, if you're worried about our democracy and you're worried about representation, you should be very worried about public sector unions, because they are undermining your vote. They're disenfranchising you by working so hard using your own money, your tax dollars. It's not money they went out and produced something of value and earned on their own. They took it from you by force. Using politicians they helped get elected, and they're going to keep taking more from you and more from you and more from you. And they're not accountable to you as a consequence. They're only accountable to the people they put in office, and they to them. So it's like this little back and forth between those two people, and you're not even involved.
Yeah. What I always say, I mean, just in general about, public sector unions, it is a government employee bargaining, union is collective bargaining on behalf of the government. Correct. For the interests of the government. Like, do you not see where there's a possible conflict of interest there? Like, it's
if you're not already part of the government, you're not a government employee yourself, you're cut out of this conversation. And people say, well, I voted. And it's like, okay, it's super. But the only candidates you had to choose from were people in all likelihood who were union friendly to start with, from both parties. Some will be like more or less union friendly, but you're not really going to get success. You'll get endorsements of the local newspaper. You're going to, this is why it's so heavily one party in some of these union strongholds. This is why it's not an accident, guys. So, they do control things. And then in terms of curriculum, because they want their teachers to do certain things, and that is to produce more people who are loyal to their interests and the politics they espouse, they will support teachers who go into the classroom and teach those values and teach those messages to your kids, so they can just have an entire society that supports what they want to support. It's just a big circle. That's all it is. You're nowhere in that conversation if you don't support what they support. You just don't have a seat at the table.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people who will support this type of union are also against, the big guys like Walmart. Like, oh, the workers of Walmart should unionize. Well, okay, what if they unionized? The union is sponsored by Walmart, and they negotiate with Walmart with lawyers that Walmart pays, and it's like any person who would look at that union is like, no, like why would they? It takes away the whole collective bargaining part. Exactly. They don't realize that they should treat this union as a corporation, the thing that they hate so much. I'm looking at their one of their financial disclosure reports from the 2019-2020 year. They took in $375 million in dues, and that is tax-free. That is tax-free dues.
Yep. And
then they also pulled out another like $209 million in selling stocks and securities. And, they're able to get tax exemption status for like property taxes in District of Columbia, because they worked that out with them. And their effective tax rate is 1.2%.
Yeah.
In that year. So like they're freaking out at all these, and they reinvest this stuff, back into politicians who are going to keep them in business. Right. Like the extreme conflict of interest and just, again, the public sector union idea in general is incredible. But the teachers who are teaching your kids, I mean, even, people say that they think of the average kindergarten teacher and like that person is not very powerful because they don't get paid a lot and maybe they're not as respected as many people would like them to be. They teach your kids. That's pretty damn powerful.
That's right.
They're the ones teaching your kids like 6 hours a day.
Well, it just comes
And
down to this. If I were a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling my kids, I'm there all day with them. Okay. I'm the person doing it. Am I not so very powerful? I'm not so very powerful with my kid. I don't have much influence, right? It's just, don't worry about what I'm saying to them. Don't worry about what I'm doing at home. It's, behind closed doors. Don't worry about that. So if you're going to say that I have a lot of power over what my kid thinks and does and so forth and so on. And I mean, that's what the teachers are saying. They're like, we needed, this somebody I saw on Twitter today who was responding to a father at a school board meeting who was speaking out against a black father, in fact, speaking out against critical race theory. And this woman in James Lindsay's feed said, oh, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I don't give an F what I don't give an F what he says and all this. And then I went to her feed to check out some other stuff she says. And she says, it's amazing to me that all of these, anti-CRT people think that we teachers are so powerful. And then in the next breath says, parents teach their kids some really stupid stuff at home. And, we need to undo that. And I'm like, you literally just contradicted yourself. So either you're so worried what parents are teaching at home when we got the kid for like 2 hours awake, maybe and on the weekends, you're so worried what we're teaching our kids, the stupid stuff that we're teaching them that you have to undo, but you're not powerful. You don't have this power to indoctrinate them. Give me a break. If anybody who spends a lot of time, anybody could be a babysitter. And I'll give you a case in point. I had a very religious, very devout Catholic babysitter when I was a little kid. And she spent a lot of time with us because I had a sort of a single dad. And, once my mom left, and she was there from the time, I got home from school, she fed us dinner, and my dad would take her home when he got home and so on. So, I mean, I spent hours with this woman, loved her. She was like the grandmother I didn't have living locally. And, she would teach me prayers. She would sit and teach me all kinds of Catholic stuff, right? A little Jewish kid. And to this day, if I lose something, I'm going around my house praying to St. Anthony to find it to this day. And I was in a body cast twice for a broken leg. And I had, if you've ever been in a cast for broken anything, you itch like crazy. I was dying. I'm like, oh, I can't stand it. And she's giving me she was Italian. So she's giving me this little pamphlet for somebody named Padre Pio. Mm-hmm. And she's having me read this prayer to this Catholic priest. And he was a saint or something. And I'm supposed to read it. And it's going to take the itching away. And I'm damned if it didn't do. Absolutely did. Probably because I was so concentrating so hard. I'm reading my little. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not Catholic. But the point is,
I'm Catholic and I endorse this.
But what I'm saying to you is that this woman had a tremendous influence on me, and she was only spending a few hours a day. Probably 4 days a week, maybe, and for let's say about 4 years. Huge influence, though. Really, as far as my values, in a good way. All good things. But as far as my values, as far as just even things I believed and, things I did, little rituals and so forth that I have to hit with me to this day. And I think it's crazy to think that the teachers don't have an influence. I mean, we send them to school because we assume they do, right? We want them to get your kid to do the homework or learn something or whatever. If you don't believe that the teacher has enough influence to get your kid to do what they're supposed to do in class, what's going on over there. So it's you don't parse that out. Well, I think you have a lot of influence to get my kid to sit still and listen and behave him or herself and be polite to other people and polite to you and learn the material, but not to appropriate your views or opinions. No, definitely. My kid has the ability to only this, but not that. I mean, come on. That's just, even adults can't do that. So they do have a lot of power, regardless of what they're paid. They have a lot of power over your child's time and your child's, experience all day long. And then, like I said, they claim to, because with critical race theory saying, oh, well, we need to center this and, do that and include this and diversify that, as if it has magical properties that when they do these things, all kinds of wonderful stuff will happen for your kid. You can't then turn around in the next breath and say, we don't have this kind of power. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that why this ideology of CRT and anti-racism is so attractive to them? Because I think it really falls in line with the way they look at the world. They believe that they can completely control what your children will do, say, and think. One of the tenets of CRT and anti-racism is We see disparate outcomes. The right wingers are claiming because it's clearly has to be biological, it has to be like inherited biologically, and that's not what we say. We say it is
I never
culture.
said that. Yeah.
Well, no, that's what they tell us that
Oh,
we say.
they
I'm
think.
told that that's what I say, and I'm like, I don't. Am I talking in my sleep? I don't know what's happening. But
Right.
what we mostly believe is culture has a lot to play in how people act and interact with the world, and they always call that a dog whistle toward racism. They believe that culture is just a covert word for that white people are better than people of color or something like that. So it's this like the disconnect between what is influencing your actions. The culture around you is influencing your actions that can control these outcomes. Like they kind of believe the same thing, that as long as we can play with your brain and mechanically tune you to or what I think some people have overtly said, kind of doing a software update to program these kids to believe in these certain things, the same thing that CRT is doing just to the general population. And now in CRT, like, Robin Weingarten comes out,
Randy.
and Randy, I always think Randy, I always think of the guy from South Park.
Robin DiAngelo, Randy Weingarten, they might as well be the same person.
Randy Marsh. And so she came out and said that, CRT, we're not teaching this to anyone outside of the university because it's just a legal studies thing, which is a good response to saying we're not teaching this bad stuff to your kids. We're only teaching it to lawyers and people who take care of the law. It's like, oh, that makes me feel so much better.
Right.
It's like, okay, now you're giving it to people who are more in authority, but it's a sort of reductive nature of it. No one understands how to define CRT, or that's the claim, because it's hard to quantify by nature. It's a feature, not a bug. They do this to wiggle out of any corners that they may find themselves in when people start attacking their ideology. And I think that's
the important thing for people to understand, and I've covered a lot on this channel and lots of other people have too, but just in case, is that it's really more accurate to talk about woke ideas. Okay. If you want to talk about it, critical race theory is just sort of one piece. It's sort of the racial branch of wokeism, if we're going to talk about a new kind of secular religion or whatever. And that is to say that it's all about the postmodern idea that there are people living in a fog who are really sort of asleep to their own oppression. They don't understand that they're truly oppressed. And only the postmodernists, only the people who have critical consciousness, who've achieved critical consciousness of all the different ways that people can be oppressed, have the knowledge and the ability to point it out to them. And then it's your job to make others, now that you're critically conscious and awake, so you're woke, now you have to go wake up other people, because the only reason they're happy or content or think things are fine or think that they're free is they're asleep. They're not critically conscious. They're just like duped. They're fooled into thinking that everything is okay when in fact they're just terribly oppressed. And so from a racial perspective, that would be, if you're not white, you're not really free. You just think you are because the white people are letting you think that you are at the moment, because it's an interest convergence. They get something out of you being successful in this moment. But if the person isn't successful because they don't think there's any reason, they can't get anything out of you. So we need you to be critically conscious of that. And the only way for there to be justice is to look for all of the ways in the law and in policy and in systems and in all the stuff that there are disparate outcomes, because that's where it is. That's where it lives. That's how you know it's there. Look for a disparate outcome, and there's the hidden racism you need to go uncover. So that's kind of the race branch. Then Kimberly Crenshaw comes along with intersectionality and says, well, we need to take a look at, gender identity and sexual orientation and people who are, disabled and all kinds of other sort of minority groups, because they too are oppressed, because there are disparate outcomes for them too. And then it's really not just race, but there's also like all these intersections in society. And we need you to be critically aware of all your identities and the intersections of them, because only when you are, can you really start to see how truly oppressed you are. Because you can't hold people accountable for your oppression unless you're aware of your oppression. But by the way, that's all you can do is hold other people accountable, because it's not your responsibility to uplift yourself and throw off the shackles of your own oppression. It is the responsibility of those who are oppressing you to stop oppressing you. So the most you can do is go, stop oppressing me, stop oppressing me, you're oppressing me, you're oppressing me, you're an oppressor. But it is not your responsibility either to apparently educate the oppressor about what your life is like. It's for them to come and find out. And then they have to hold themselves accountable and they have to make changes. But you can't, none of this can occur until you first are critically conscious of all of your oppression stuff. So that you have the race part, the gender part, all these branches that are, that are part of this sort of woke idea of you need to be critically conscious. So when we talk about CRT, it's just the race branch, and it's just about racial disparities. But in our schools right now, we have all of the branches represented. You have the gender queer theory stuff. You've got, the trans ideology. All of that is part of it. But it's really just this postmodern thing that life is a series of power struggles. Everything is interactional. Okay. And you don't exist as an individual. You can't just come and go and move around the world without being oppressed by all these other people. And until you're aware of that, you can't be liberated, I guess. And it's absolutely, that's their worldview. And so when CRT is coming to the classroom, it's not coming into the classroom as what I just said. Because obviously a kindergartner, first grade, fifth grade, they can't, they're like, what? The way it's coming in is in these little lesson plans designed to awaken the young child to either their oppression or oppressiveness. Okay, because if you're white, then you're an oppressor, and so on. So this is what is going on. And when people say I'm opposed to critical race theory or I'm opposed to CRT, I really wish we could call it something more like I said, critical pedagogy or just even wokeism. It would be more accurate if we just said, I don't want woke ideas in the school. I don't. I mean, it sounds more slang to say woke, but it's also more accurate. It really is, because no, they're not teaching this college, or graduate school theory about the law. And they're not really teaching intersectionality either, not until maybe high school, but they are teaching our kids that they just don't know how oppressed they are. They just don't know how bad the world really is. And here are all these little lessons we're going to put you through to wake you up, to make you conscious of your privilege or your oppression, so you could just be conscious all the time of this, which of course translates into mental illness. Right? No, it does. Literally, you become hypersensitive to things that may or may not be real. It's a kind of cognitive distortion, but that's what they want, because then what you can do with people who are so on edge and on guard like that is you can come in, you can swoop in with the solution, right? And the solution, of course, will be things like redistribution of wealth, like, a suspension of civil liberties for the oppressors. So they're not going to teach our kids what their suggested solutions are yet. They first need to make them so critically conscious and critically like this, that they are more than happy to hear about how we're going to suspend civil liberties for half the population.
Yeah. I think you just hit the word on the head there. The word I was looking for is critical consciousness, that you don't understand your own oppression or you don't understand your own oppressiveness. I think there's some people out there who pointed out a good distinction. Like Karl Ambrosenko is one of them, that CRT should not be distilled as something that's just anti-whiteness. I think it's a bit of a feature that goes through the back door. It doesn't explicitly, some people are smart enough to say, no, not all white people are bad, but whiteness is bad and all white people have whiteness. Therefore, henceforth, all white people are bad. Really, they kind of go through the back door. But the whole reason why they attack this whiteness or really make up whiteness as if all white people are the same, like we meet every Tuesday, by the way, I missed last Tuesday, so please send me your notes. But
Yes.
There is a way around it that they get to go to the anti-whiteness angle, but they rely on us being more reductive to say, oh, this is all anti-whiteness, so they can go out and say, oh no, these people are just racist and they just want to keep their white majority or something like that. But I like the reason why it's good to not be reductive like that, because what you don't want to do, and it's something that I think Carlin pointed out quite accurately, is you do not want the CRT reaction to be white supremacy. That is what you want to avoid. You do not want to use this as a way to say, hey, look at white people, you're just being attacked for this thing. That's not a good way to do it. You got to explain it the way that you're explaining it now, the critical consciousness that's trying to awaken young children, especially young children, to say, hey, you're an oppressor. Like, you're going to grow up into an oppressor. There's really no way you can get off this freeway to oppression. It's just, you need to become an ally. And it's a sick religion that does not allow for any repentance. It does not allow for you
Redemption.
there's no way to forgive your sins. It's like you are stuck with this original sin that you cannot really get rid of. You just need to be an ally long enough and need to be used long enough so they can, push all this stuff through. But I think a lot of what you described there is, critical race theory is a subset of this critical theory. James Lindsay kind of goes into just calling it, theory in his book, Cynical Theories. But there can be derivatives off of this critical race theory that, like you said, you can't teach proper critical race theory to children. They're not going to understand it. You can't read the stories of Derek Bell to these kids and have them understand all of the background information that they're talking about. So you need to distill it down. And that's where I think anti-racism comes in, right? I think a kindergartner could read Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist and understand it. They're probably smart enough to be like, that's stupid, but they can at least kind of understand it.
The important thing for people to understand is, because it is so tempting when you see rhetoric, for example, in the lesson plans, or even just see it on Twitter, just people talking, or Mark Lamont Hill or whatever. When you see rhetoric that is explicitly white hating, okay, I'm not going to, use terms like anti-white, but I mean, it is, but point is they're being hateful. They're being explicitly racist against white people, and they're making no bones about it. So it's really tempting to go down that path and say that that's what it is. But it's really important for people to understand that, yes, of course it is. But it's more that it's anti-reality, because the reality of life is there's no such thing as whiteness. Okay. Phenotypically pale skin has nothing to do with culture, has nothing to do with, there are people in Bosnia, as an example, okay, or in parts of Eastern Europe, who look about as white as I am, but they're Muslim, as an example. Okay. And they do not share my culture. They do not share your culture. We have very different viewpoints on a lot of things, but if you looked at them, they might be just as pale. Or people, for example, in, where's that place? Chechnya. Okay. They look as Aryan as the day is long, right? And, except they grow their beards, but they're Muslim. So it's just ludicrous to buy into this idea that there's even a thing as white culture or whiteness. In fact, there isn't really a specific Black culture. What we have is African American. Okay, so people, in other words, are descended from African descendant of slaves, or ADOS, or whatever they call it, that there is a culture that one could tie that is derived from those people. You have people who've come to the United States from African countries who have completely different cultural norms, right? And they're, just because they look the same, they don't necessarily share the same culture or even values. So we got to stop buying into their terminology. And they use terms like Black culture and white culture and Blackness and whiteness. It's false. It's false. Reality is a lot more complicated than that. Reality is not as emotionally satisfying as that. And, I understand that when people are persecuted over time, it is a survival skill to attach to, like, a group. Jews did it, different groups that have been persecuted over time have attached it because it helps you survive. It helps you persevere. But it's not really great long term if what you want is to have equity. I mean, what you want is to live in a pluralistic society and have people just have it be race irrelevant, sort of color irrelevant. It's not color blind, it's just color irrelevant. Like, in terms of your success. It may be relevant to you. It may be something that, culture of your ancestors, culture of your family, things, rituals that you want to hand down and all those kinds of elements of culture. Then, of course, it's relevant to you. But what I'm talking about is in the society, in the legal framework and the institutions. as Americans, the American creed is that it should be irrelevant to your success. If somebody, it should be neutral. I'm going to hire somebody, and I'm going to hire the person with the best qualifications. I couldn't care less what your background
Sounds
is.
like you're talking about capitalism, and that's from what I hear.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would be if we were defining it correctly, but the thing is, when we use terms like, whiteness and blackness or anti-white or anti-black or whatever this is, we're using their terminology. By them, I mean leftist, collectivist, Marxist. Okay, that the ideas of the zero sum, us, them, false dichotomy world. And so I think it's more effective to say anti-reality and anti-American, because in this country, that is not what we believe. That is not the creed. That is not what we celebrated the other day. And whether we lived up to it that day in 1776 or not, that was the aspirational goal, was all men be, created equal, endowed by their creator, and so forth. And I just think, so we have to be careful that when we point out, yes, Mark Lamont Hill is racist against white people. He hates white people. It is very clear. His rhetoric is anti-white. His rhetoric. Okay. That is very different from saying this set of theories or wokeism is this. Okay.
Yeah.
And because that won't be effective. It's not even that I'm afraid like white supremacists are going to rise up. They either are or they aren't. I'm not operating from a position of fear. I'm operating from a position of wanting to be effective at helping people understand what's going on. And what is going on is it's two competing realities. That's literally what it is. There's the reality that we see that is objective reality that you can measure with your five senses and quantify. And there's the reality that the woke church, the woke temple, the woke theories is pushing. And it's a pseudo reality. So James calls it. It's a pseudo reality based on subjective measures that are constantly changing. It's an ever moving target. You will never, ever be there or get there or whatever. Why someone would want to live in such a dystopian reality, I will never know. But in order to live there, they had to create a pseudo morality and a pseudo logic to go with it. That's why nothing they say makes sense, because it's illogical. That's why the morality is so twisted that it's perfectly okay to discriminate against people because discrimination. That's a pseudo morality. And that one will fall without the others. If you don't maintain all of them at the same time, the whole thing falls apart like a house of cards. So I just would much prefer to call it what it is. It's a kind of psychopathy, mental illness. If you've ever felt like these people are ill, because they are. And I don't mean ill like the kind of mental illness where somebody is certifiable and they need to be put in a mental institution. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a twisted way of thinking that is not responding to reality. There are constructs that are operating up here that don't match with what you can see and touch and feel and hear and all that. And that's not real.
I mean, I would argue it could be officially labeled as a mental illness, because if you ever meet a true believer of this stuff, I mean, reality, like our objective reality, is the antidote, the drug toward it, and they're super reluctant to take that, unfortunately.
No, they will react like you're feeding them poison.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how you know you've got somebody like really over the edge. In a video I did the other day, I showed a clip of a woman who won a contest. It was like a high school kid won a contest for an anti-racist video. And she got so passionate, this disgusting reality in which we live. And she just was like, her whole face and her cadence was like cult member. And listening to her, I'm like, on what planet do you live? Like it's has nothing to do with actual reality. And there's no sense that these people have any awareness of the world outside their own head. Forget outside this country, outside their own school or outside their own town. And even within their own town, they obviously don't have much exposure to other people who think differently, because then they might be jarred awake. The irony is it's so much projection. They're telling us we're asleep, and they're literally asleep. They're like wandering around in a nightmare. And the problem is that we are subjected to their nightmare because they're in positions of power over our children, in particular, with the teachers unions and the teachers and so forth. And they look for all the world like people who mean well. They have smiles. We care. You know, we want to help you. We care about your children and my kids, our kids, and we're going to do the right thing and teach them the truth and all this. And nobody wants to believe that the people caring for their children have ill intent. And I actually don't believe that most of them do have ill intent. I think they
No.
sincerely believe they're helping. Just like, you know, the people who went and joined, you know, various cults thought they were sincerely doing the right thing. They brought their kids along. This is for my child. This is so important. That's what we're dealing with right now. Heaven's Gate like type stuff, minus the spaceships.
Fortunately, dang.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been kind of reading up a little bit onto the background of some of this kind of reality building, because I think there was something that came out today or yesterday that like the Iowa school district released something that kind of showed what they were teaching these young kids, and one of the pieces was like why whiteness is the reason that police officers will shoot a black child but not even draw their gun at a white child or something like that. And that's
Because
like reality building, because I mean, this is, if you teach young children, especially young children of color, because it disproportionately hurts them. I mean, that's why I don't know if I consider this anti-white, because you're disproportionately harming people of color,
right,
as opposed to white people. But imagine implementing this idea that a small young black child is going to go around with a police officer who's meant to protect them, has every intention of protecting them, but they could just draw a gun randomly on them at any minute and shoot them. Right. And we know empirically this isn't true. Like the amount of, we have statistical data on our black people who get shot is never over like 30 a year, which is still bad. But even considering that, just because you're unarmed,
when you consider the millions of interactions,
yeah,
it's
like it's not even close. No. But this is a sort of reality building. You need people, like this is the first step that a young person kind of wrap their head around. It's going to send them down the road to this ideology. And to reverse their track on that road is extraordinarily difficult. They need to have a really, come to Jesus moment, or they just need to see it, in front of them, being like, this is not how it is. It's, a kid like that needs to befriend a police officer to understand like what they're thinking in their head. It's like, but no,
here's the
trying
problem,
to take people out. Yeah.
They've gotten really good. The teachers unions, the purveyors of this garbage have gotten really good at inoculating children against people like us who would want to show them reality. And this is why I'm trying to get parents to understand that, no, you can't necessarily just have your kid come home and unindoctrinate them each day. Okay. Because while they're busy showing them this false reality, showing them data from one side and slanting it, telling them certain messages, they're also putting in there the message that, and anyone who tells you different is a racist. Anyone who tries to show you different data is, like they project, has an agenda, is an evil white supremacist, wants to keep you asleep, wants to keep this hidden from you, doesn't want you to have power. So if they try to show you other stuff, don't look at it. It's bad. And it's really the same thing. Like I said, every cult, every, like even back when there were religious reformations where people, I don't mean reformation, but the kind where they like, where was a resurgence in fundamentalism, for example. One of the components of sort of a fundamentalist revival is anybody telling you different is the devil. Right? It's like, don't listen to anybody other than me, because that's how you know the devil is talking to you. And that's pretty much what they're doing. They're casting anybody who challenges them to a child as the equivalent of Satan. And so your kid is then tasked with trying to figure out who's lying to them. Now they spend how many hours a day with the teacher? And how many hours a day with you? And do you even know at the end of the day that you need to do this? So maybe you don't figure it out till 6 months have gone by and you never challenged it. So maybe the kid even thinks you agree. And then you finally find out and you go, whoa, wait a minute. And you come on like, like a whatever, a battering ram. And you're like, no, this isn't true. Da, da, da. But your kid has had 6 months of anyone who tells you this, anyone who tells you that don't listen, and all the people who disagree. And they're also saying things to you, to kids that are not so subtle about how their parents and their parents' generation created these systems. These systems are bad because the people who came before you made them bad. Your parents included. It's implied. It's not always explicit, but it's implied. Now wait till they get to be adolescents and they're already rebelling. The high school kids, they're already rebelling.
Yeah, I mean, so I read "Faces at the Bottom of the Well" by Derek Bell because I hate myself. And I don't know if you ever read that.
No,
right.
I don't hate myself.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm just trying to figure
kidding.
out, why, like, who are the thought leaders of this movement? And Derek Bell's certainly one of them. What Derek Bell, does in this book is he writes these ideas in narrative form. This is not an explicit book like How to Be an Anti-Racist or The New Jim Crow or anything like that. It's a book in narrative form, and I think he takes that literally it's not a religious idea, but the Bible is so effective because it teaches lessons in narrative form.
Correct.
That is how we learn. This is why we're attracted to movies, TV shows. This is why we love those mediums, is because we can actually learn something a lot better through a narrative form than we can just being told a lesson.
Right.
And so, he does it there. He's got a lot of legal background in there. He's a law professor, and this is again CRT, which is taught in law school. But one of the themes he pushes through there is that the system, because it was built by the West, built by racists, the system is going to be racist, even if there are no individual racists left. So, I mean, think about that. Even if there is no white person, black, no one who's got any racist intentions, the system will still be racist. Therefore, it needs to get taken down. This is why they attack institutions, or not institutions, basically ideas like capitalism, free markets, just a description of human behavior. But I mean, this is why they attack these things, is because it's kind of built in the narrative they're telling themselves. I mean, he's literally building this book just like kind of the Bible. He's trying to teach you a lesson, except for I don't think he does it super effectively. I don't know if you ever read the book, but he just kind of hits you over the head with a bunch of stuff and some like really interesting evidence. But then his final story in there, because I read it because I wanted to see, are you just going to build a fiction to prove your point? And for most of the book, he actually really supplies a lot of evidence to back this up, like historical evidence to back this up. But then the last one, he literally had to make up these people, because the worst thing he did the whole time is saying all white people are the same. Again, like we meet every Tuesday or something like that. Like,
sure, yeah,
all the white people are inherently bad. But the last one, he did that exactly what I was afraid he was going to do. He had to build this false white people race that absolutely hated, black people in no uncertain terms to prove his story. So he literally used fiction to say, this is how you should look at them. This is how you should look at whiteness, is because of these fictitious people I made. And to me, that was just like, I don't know how this can be, relevant material in college for any major, but especially in law. Like, this guy is one of the archetypes of CRT, which again derives down to different things like what I call anti-racism, which to me is the less mature form of CRT. This is why I think there's a distinction that I think I'm beginning to see between CRT and Ibram X. So when I say CRT, I'm talking about Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw. Sure. When I'm saying anti-racist, I'm talking about Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. I think they're two different.
All that Ibram X. Kendi did is he took critical race theory, and he doesn't deny that it had a huge influence on him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't deny it, okay? But all he's done is it would be like somebody taking Marx and saying, and now here's what you got to do. And here's how to put the Marxism into actual action. So all that Kendi did was he said, okay, yeah, that's true. That's true that racism is at the heart of every interaction. Racism is underpinning every law that we have, every institution that we have. It's all racism. And the reason that, you ever see any disparate outcomes is not because that's reality and how life works for everyone. And you just happen to be cherry picking statistics that show black against white in these areas. But interestingly, we're not looking at the NBA or football or, entertainment or, we're not looking at poor white people. No. We're only going to look over here. See, that's here. So he's just taken and given you a blueprint or an action plan for, okay, so in order to be anti the racism that critical race theory told you about, critical race theory told you it was there. This is the theory. Interestingly, we abandon the fact that it's a theory and we tell you it's a theory that is fact at the same time. So there it is. And now what my book tells you is how, it's literally called how to be anti this thing that was identified, the kind of racism that is not in individual action, the kind of racism that doesn't even live just in individual people. It's just like everywhere. But of course, it's in the people too. So here's what you do. It's the work. All Kendi did was he took critical race theory and actualized it. That's it. So, to sit there and go, oh, well, they're separate and they're totally different. It's like, that's utterly ridiculous. That is that's like saying, I have a theory that you could take a bunch of stuff and mix it together and make a birthday cake. I have a theory. It's, I think there's this delicious food item that you could make from butter and sugar and flour and stuff like that. And I think it would make delicious food. And then somebody comes along and makes a cookbook and say, oh, this has nothing to do how to make a cake. And I think there's a thing called cake. No, they have nothing to do with each other. Really?
But so here's the interesting observation I've made in the attempt. And I've talked about this to Truman of Return to Reason. I talked to him a lot. And we just had a phone conversation to see if what I'm seeing is actually in reality. When I listen to people, especially on YouTube, who are like the CRT types, the actual Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw CRT types, they hate Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. They hate those two. I always thought they hated Robin DiAngelo because she's a white lady hopping on the cash train, but they actually hate her, like the way she puts her ideas. And that's what has me thinking. I'm like, is there some a little bit? I think they hate them because they're making money off a relatively new kind of anti-racist theory that is a branch off of CRT that's been around for decades and hasn't made the money, but has had the influence. Or to me, I also think, like Ibram Kendi says, the way you fight past discrimination is present discrimination. The way you fight present discrimination is future discrimination. Are they saying the quiet part out loud? Like, are they being way too overt in the way that they're presenting this, critical
I was
race
just
theory?
thinking, as we're talking, I was just thinking, like, maybe they're pissed off because they thought they were really getting there the nice, slow, like Soviet KGB way. And along come the overreachers who want to grift and make money, and they're going to blow it all up because they're being too overt about it. I don't know, but I'm not really hearing a coherent argument from Bell and Crenshaw, whatever, about why they hate them. So, they might say like, oh, we hate him. And he said that. And it's like, be specific. Why do you hate
And that's
them?
the thing. Every single time I've heard, oh, I hate these people, they never expand on it much.
That's why we're left to fill in the blanks. And to me, if I hate somebody, like let's say somebody came along and they took Ayn Rand, they took, somebody that I think has great ideas, and they gave a like how to be an objectivist book. Okay. And the book was like really obnoxious. And it had things like, just walk all over people and you're the most important person ever living. It was basically like a how to be a narcissist kind of a thing, which is so misrepresenting of what objectivism is, right? It just feeds into everybody's fears about what it is and wouldn't be the real thing. I would be very explicit. I would be saying, I hate these people because, first of all, they're lying. That's not what it means. And let me explain to you how it's wrong in detail. And I would go through and I would pick it apart, line for line, and explain, comparing and contrasting to the original text and saying, this is why this is totally false and wrong and a grift. Okay. This is some kind of weird cult. Don't pay any attention to this. In fact, these people should be run out of town because they're giving this a bad name. And in fact, objectivists who look at objectivist critics, the people who criticize Rand and say those very things about her. So they're not giving a how-to. They're like, oh, this is why you should hate it. They're very explicit about why they're wrong. And they go to great lengths to explain. I've not heard Bell and Crenshaw do that. I've not heard them say. So it makes me feel like maybe you're right. Maybe they're just pissed off because they're collecting the money and those guys aren't.
Yeah. But I mean, in a way, it really depends on what the strategy is. Like, to me, the Kendi type of anti-racism, they're playing the quantity game where they are trying to get as many normally young minds on this idea as they can, where the CRT, Derek Bells, Kimberly Crenshaws are playing the quality game. It's like, we don't need as many people to believe in this, but we need the very influential people, the lawyers, the people going through higher education. We need them to believe this. So they're just playing a very different game, I think, but there's definitely, and I'm interested to see how this manifests itself in the future, to see if there's some sort of fracturing within the
Right.
CRT framework, within the CRT. You know, if
Well,
the
even
CRT
in
become the Catholic Church and these become all the
well,
other religions, or
well,
I'm wondering what they're going to do.
Even in China, it's my understanding that there's still the CCP, right? Chinese Communist Party.
Hmm?
But there are still real communist, like hardline communists in China right now who are just appalled at how much capitalism is there. Okay. And they're just disgusted with the rise in the bourgeoisie and all this. And they are persecuted, ironically, within China, is my understanding, because they're too hardline. Yeah, but they're,
Mhm.
so they don't like what's going on there. So I think there are people in any kind of cultural revolution or any kind of idea competition like this, where you have your purists and then you have your like, we're going to use this part but not this part, but we're going to do that, this works for us for this, but like, think about it. Kendi is making bank, so is D'Angelo, pushing Marxian ideas, but for tall coin. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'll take $25,000 to talk to you for half an hour. I mean, it's such a giant contradiction. And I'm not saying that, Crenshaw and Bell, wouldn't get paid. Bell's not with us anymore, is he? He's dead, right?
Yeah, I don't know if he passed. Yeah.
Anyway,
Gotcha.
but I mean, I think I'm not saying they don't get paid to speak. I'm just saying I don't get the feeling that was their priority. Like you, I think they're more purists, that they're more like, oh no, we want these ideas to advance through the, academia and the culture and the institutions and become, the
Yeah.
way people think, replace the Enlightenment with these ideas. I'm not sure Kendi and D'Angelo will give a fig about whether they replace the Enlightenment. I think they're working out some psychological
I
problems.
think if they do replace it, like Kendi's, I think, angling for a bit of a political angle by trying to get the Department of Anti-Racism up, which is just, that would be the worst thing to ever happen. Well, okay, since slavery, the worst thing that ever happened.
He'd be like Robespierre, but with with braids.
Nice.
I mean,
yeah. So, I'm doing this a book review with Truman, and we're reviewing F.A. Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, and one of the main ideas in there is the communists hated the socialists hated the communists. But they understood that the converts between both of them are really easy to capture because it's the exact same thing effectively. A little bit, their profits might be different, and a little bit of differences in their ideology, but they claim to hate each other. But who they hate in reality is the liberal. That's who they absolutely
of course.
hate. So I see the anti-racism CRT in that way. It's like they might start hating each other because of the profits that they follow, but you as a parent, you as a student need to understand they hate you more. Like they hate us more than they hate each other.
Right. Yeah. I'm not even like a little bit interested. I mean, it's interesting we talked about this, but that's about, I'm not really interested or going to spend 1 minute of my time worrying about why they hate each other or what they hate about, what they think of each other. That is like a complete waste of my time. All I care about is how this is manifesting in our institutions and affecting us and our children and, our freedoms and so forth, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And they can go have their internecine or, fights off in some academic, office somewhere. But we need to worry about what our kids are being taught. And as I said, the reason it's so effective is that they give you the counter argument with the argument. So you're already prepared when you go out into the world and meet someone who says, yeah, but that doesn't conform to reality. They say, oh, you're only saying that because fill in the blank. And it's apparently effective. I spoke with somebody tonight who's working on some stuff out in California for math instruction. And he said they've been talking to people who are otherwise liberal, like think of themselves as liberals, but they are pretty much bought in on the idea that the only people who oppose this are far right-wing extremists, conservatives, and that's what's blanketing everything, whether it's Facebook or the news or whatever, and trying to get people to look outside their typical, messaging systems, whatever, wherever they're already looking is really tough. It's really hard to do. So, when we set up this conversation, we said one of the things we're going to talk about is there a political solution to this, right? Because they're claiming it's a political, far right wing conspiracy theory, plot, etc. Right? So and we know that the critical theorists say everything's political, everything's power struggle, and everything's political. But is it really? Now, our argument is no, it's not. Our argument is this isn't political for the people who are opposed to it. It's philosophical, it's cultural, it's and it, politics are there, but they're sort of downstream from all that other stuff. And this is the people opposed to it are really quite a diverse mix of people, politically speaking. And so, what do you think? Do you think that those of us who make up this sort of unlikely coalition of different political views and so forth, but are united in being opposed to their ideas, is there a political solution for us? Can we just elect it away? Can we vote it away? Can we ban it away? Can we do things legislatively, politically to stop this, or no? Because a lot of people think we can, obviously.
Yeah. I'll say that the states who have gone through the effort of banning CRT in schools, the states who are going through the effort of banning it in schools, are taking a positive step forward, but they would be wholly wrong, as we've seen from the quotes from these major teachers unions, that that's not going to be enough.
Right.
You can't, I think it's going to have to be a two-front war here. I think it's got to be a little political, just because the problem a lot, especially with conservatives, is they're not willing to use their political power when they have it, which is a worthwhile goal. I don't want to use political power to hammer home my beliefs or force people to believe in what I believe. The only problem is the opposing side does. And when they get power, all they're going to do is do as much as they can when they're in power, and then they're out of power. It's going to be the ineffective conservatives who are not going to do anything against it. So you can't say that it cannot have a political solution at all. I don't think that's realistic. But you also can't say that, okay, we're going to vote the right politicians in, and then it's their job now. That's what they do. You can't do that. You cannot sit on your hands and wait for politicians to save your children from bad teachers. You have to be, active yourself in the culture, and it's fighting any way you can. And I don't know exactly what that looks like when doing it non-politically, other than trying to get information out there. But like you said, the people who are teaching this stuff are building an offense and a defense at the same time. They're not just saying, all right, believe in this, but we're not going to teach you any defenses to put up against it. They're going to use the defense that anyone who approaches you and says CRT might be a bad idea is undercover racist. That is hard to undoctrinate people who are going to have that belief system. Right. So to answer your question, I think you have to do both. I don't think you can ignore one or the other. You have to have a two-front solution there.
I want to address this out of the blue. You described the fire in great detail while ignoring the cause and possible. First of all, the cause is utterly irrelevant at this point. And we did discuss the cause. I'm not sure when you joined in, but okay. You are worse than the arsonist. You will discuss every fine point until the cows come home. No, not really. But what we are trying to do is counter some of the bad arguments being made in the media about what the shape of this thing is and what it's called. So if we never address the lies, if we never sit there and say, no, that's actually not what it is, and it is this is what it actually is, then people are left with only that. I'm not going to sit here and stay silent and let the people who want to burn down the country define what they're doing in their terms. I'm going to say what it is in plain English so my audience can understand it. Kevin, would you like to address that comment? Because that's way out of left field as far as I'm concerned. I think we explained in some detail why we were talking about the postmodernists and all this other garbage, because they're claiming that they're the only ones who understand reality. And there are people who are susceptible to that. We're like, okay, they seem smart. All right.
Yeah. I mean, you have to explain the origins of anything to get to its root cause. There's just so many different iterations of what has come before. It started with Marx, although it's not always super useful to bring up that it's Marxian in philosophy.
You also can't just throw it out there and go, oh, it's Marxian and be done with it, because that sounds so hyperbolic and people go, oh, whatever. It's reductive. Yeah, you have to explain how it literally is. And then maybe people will be like, oh, crap. Yeah, it really is. But as far as solutions, I'm all about solutions. I'm coming on here every day sitting there saying, you got to leave the schools, because no, there isn't. If you guys are coming here from this moment forward, if anybody watching this is coming here expecting me to tell you how to take back your schools, go find a different channel. because you can't, because they weren't yours to start with. They're government schools. Let me say it again. They're government schools. Government runs them. Government and its union lobbyists that it funds and that it gets, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. They do a little dance. They are running the schools. They are deciding what your kids are learning. You can't take back that which was never yours. Your children are a marketable commodity for these people. They are tools. They are being used. You are being extorted. They're not yours to take back. If you want to take back something, take back your child. Your child belongs to you, at least for a little while longer. The longer you submit your child to the government system, the more likely they are to play their little in loco parentis game and literally take your child away from you, because they're already deciding that your views are insurrectionist and extremist and terribly dangerous. So the longer you oppose this and continue to send your kid into the lion's den, the more likely they will literally take your child from you, because guess what? They actually do have the power to do that increasingly. And every day that goes on, they have more of it. It's a lot harder to pull somebody into something than to put a wall up and keep them there if they're already there. So yes, you have power to take your kid back. That's your solution. You cannot take your school back. You can go to all the school board meetings you want. You can stand up there and be super brave and have people make videos of you. And you can speak eloquently against this horrible, toxic ideology. You can do all of these things and people will applaud while they sit on their sofa and go, oh yeah, you go, you do it. Oh, that's wonderful, as they send their kid back into the school. But you will not change a damn thing. You're not going to move the needle one single bit. My solution, you're not going to like. I know you're not going to like it, but it's leave. It is literally the only power you have. But guess what? It's a huge power, because they have nothing without your children. Without your children, they have no dollars. The funding is actually tied to butts and seats. So if you get as many of your friends as you can round up to just unenroll, even don't tell them you might come back. Do it for 6 months. Take a long vacation. Get a babysitter to watch your kids while you go to work. It would be less dangerous to their mental health and their intellectual development than sending them into that cesspool of hell. Okay? And when you do that and the money dries up and the politicians start biting their fingernails because you've made it abundantly clear you're not putting up with it anymore, suddenly you have power again. But as long as you're sending your kid into the system, what is their incentive to change? Nothing. Zero. So there's my solution. I know you don't like it. I know everybody writes to me and says, oh, you're attacking people and oh, this is terrible. Knock yourself out. Go use the solution. I don't use the schools. This isn't going to affect me as much as it affects you and your kids. But if you think it's hard to homeschool, try paying for the shrink bills. Oh, never mind that. Try finding a shrink who isn't woke. Try finding somebody who's not going to say, you're the bad guy, mom and dad. So that's my solution. And I'm very sorry you don't like it. Well, if you'd like something more specific, then my solution is get 10 of your favorite people together that you work with, that you know in your neighborhood who have kids a similar age. Find somebody who can, stay home and run a curriculum. You can share the cost of the curriculum. Pay that person $5 a kid per week. They'll be making the equivalent. If it's 15 kids, they'll be making about 75 grand a year. And that's a pretty tidy sum. You don't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever on private school. Go find a church basement. Go find somebody who has a big living room or a barn and do it. Get it done. That's my solution. Sorry.
Yeah. No, this is why I don't get on your bad side. But yeah,
no, I'm tired
exactly
of it.
Right.
You don't offer any solutions. You didn't tell us what to do. Well, excuse me. I'm also doing this for free. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know any way to find a solution without first talking through it first. So, yeah, I didn't really understand where that comment came from or why I was thrown in there. But, yeah, someone said on there,
I addressed it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Someone, said on there, I think Patrice Bake, did you miss the point of YouTube? Yeah. Well, what are you supposed to, you're talking on YouTube. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, like, and like I said, I don't know who's coming here. I don't know what they know. I don't know what they've watched. I don't know if they've ever heard of James Lindsay. I don't know if they know what postmodernism is. I don't know if they care. But I'll tell you what is not going to work. It is not going to work to explain to people why wokeism is bad and critical race theory is a problem and all of this indoctrination is indoctrination. If you just jump right in and go, we got to solve this problem. They're going to be like, what problem? I know something's kind of not really right and everybody's complaining, people are not happy, but like, why are you guys sound crazy. And then when the teachers union goes on the TV and says, oh, these right-wing extremists that are the exact same people who stormed the Capitol, don't you know? They just are perpetuating this myth that we're hurting your children. So we have to explain it because we don't know who's showing up and where they are in this process. And unfortunately, I'm probably going to have to explain it another 100 times before everybody who comes here figures it out, because I only have 3,000 people who are subscribed to this channel. I don't know who the heck's watching. And for all I know, everybody here is here for the first time. So yeah, it's like, I don't know what people want us to do. I really don't. But I'll tell you what, Kevin, every day, not going to lie, every day I have this internal battle where I say to myself, I'm just going to not do it anymore. I'm just not going to do it anymore. Like, what is the point? What is the point? It's not working. Like, they're winning. That's how I feel half the time. I'm like, I love to sew. I love to cook. And I have 3 beautiful children who need my attention. They're my children. It is not my business or problem to solve other people's problems. And that's my natural inclination, is just to be like, you're on your own. And I want to like go out and build a shade garden in my yard. I want to plant some vegetables. I would really like to like just live my life and read some books and just, put on blinders and not turn on the TV and never go on YouTube again and just hope I live through it all. Every day I have this battle with myself. And then I say, no, I will never forgive myself if I don't try to do something. So here I am being an idiot, being a masochist.
Yeah. Got to do what you got to do.
Whatever.
But yeah, I so much of this is important to understanding why it's even worth fighting. I mean, you're not going to understand. Someone who just goes and says CRT is bad and stops there is not going to win over anyone. Is also not going to convince anyone else why it's worth fighting. Understanding what the actual ideology behind this and understanding what they're trying to do. Again, if just telling someone they're trying to create another reality is kind of scary enough to me, even if that reality is not as dark as the one that they're actually trying to create.
Right.
And so, yeah, if you care about your kids, the first thing you got to do is understand why to care about them and then know your next steps. Now, I can agree in some ways that there are too many people here talking about how bad things are. I'm specifically pointing at some Republicans and some more conservative commentators who are, all they do is to make their money saying how bad this thing is, but they don't propose solutions. There's no action items at the end anywhere. And so that's why I think that that's a good place for, smaller creators like you and me to come in and say, okay, here's the steps you can take. Cause I'm in the midst of this. I'll admit my kids are in public school right now because only in the last, year or so have I kind of learned more and more about, why there's no possible way that I can really go in there and try to hold the school board accountable. Like that's not going to be effective enough.
Right.
I was naive enough, I think, let's say 8 months ago to believe that I could truly do that. Then, the thing that really opened up my eyes is the shutdowns and my kids not going to school ever. And they're just getting shut out and they're getting, they lost a whole year of education last year because of how powerful the teachers unions are, how powerful they are keeping the teachers out, but still getting paid and not teach the kids. So it wasn't even necessarily CRT that opened my eyes to this.
Sure.
But now it's just another thing to pile on top.
You're in good company of having figured that out. It's like, I think that was the light bulb moment for a lot of people. Is like, wait a minute, they have a lot of sway over my life, and honestly, I think that's as good a reason, even if you're like not sure about all this other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Consider the fact that your livelihood, your existence, your coming, your going, your, all of this stuff was held by these people for 15 months in many states. In some states it wasn't, obviously, very few, but some. And to me, that's reason enough to sort of step back and consider your options and just say, hang on a second, if I want real stability in my life and my child's life and their learning, and so I want continuity, and maybe you have a child with special needs, so it's even more important, like, as far as making sure you have that like plan in place because they can't just adapt as easily, then that would be a good time to sort of take a step back and think about it and come up with an alternative solution. And look, I could be wrong. I could still be wrong. There are people, and the beauty of being 50 states and territories and whatever is that there may be states or localities where it could be effective You could go to your school, but you could solve this problem politically and legislatively and be reasonably home free for your child's particular years of education. It's possible. Okay. The possibility exists. What I'm saying is that at large, like by and large across the whole country, if you're looking at can we take back public education, that's the point I'm trying to make, is that like, no, that I can't have a YouTube channel aimed at like everyone and say that that's even remotely likely. Okay. Now, you, Kevin, only you can choose. And anybody watching this, only you know individually what's going on down on the ground in your town. Okay. I just want you guys to be wide awake to the reality of the situation and really understand how unions work, how school boards work, even at the local little town level. Okay. It still matters with how people get elected because they have money to get elected. I want you to understand that then when you're educated and when you understand the mechanics of it all, then you can make an educated decision. Then you're not just sort of hoping. It's not wishful thinking that my school seems okay. And you could really look and you could really say, all right, I know these 5 school board members personally, and they're pretty cool and they agree with me. And then I went to the meeting and they assured me this and that and the other, right? So then you have a better sense of what's going on. But as I said, as a resource, I have to address everybody. And so when I address everybody, I say, look, the solution is if you want to be 100%, if you want to be 100% certain that your kid is not being indoctrinated, that your kid is not going to come home and go, maybe I'm really a boy, or whatever. Any of that, whatever it is that concerns you about all of this stuff. It could be some things more than others. If you want to be certain, the only way to be certain is for you to do it yourself. And it sounds like I'm saying, and the sky is blue and like the sun comes up in the east. But for a lot of people, that's still not a given because they still believe they don't have the qualifications. They still think it's not feasible. Like, oh, no, I have to have schooling 8 hours a day and it has to be these 5 subjects and so on. And so I'm just trying to say, look, no, the solution is a lot simpler than you think it is. Yes, you are capable and it is worthy of your consideration. If you want to be certain, if you're not concerned with being certain, totally different. We're having a different conversation. But if you're coming to me going, then that's my solution.
Yeah, I think the first episode of the series that we did, I asked you the simple question is if really any 2-parent household who prioritized it high enough, could they be able to homeschool their kids?
100%.
And your answer was yes. And the first thing you said was school doesn't have to be from 8 to 2 like it is at a normal school. No. And already to me, I'm like, duh. That wasn't even something I considered.
And that's what I mean. It's like a lot of people just need that piece of information. Mm-hmm. The schools, the teachers unions and the teachers are very fond of saying, the parents don't know because they're not certified, and they will be explicit that way. They will tell parents, you can't do this. They're opposed not just to school choice, but to homeschooling. And their argument is always the same. The parents don't know how to do it. They don't know how children learn. They don't know this. They don't know that. I'm sorry. That to tell a parent, especially when a lot of the teachers aren't parents. Okay, Randy Weingarten's not a parent. To say, parents don't know how children learn. I'm like, does that pass the smell test? We have observed our children learn everything from how to sit up to how to hold a spoon to how to, walk and talk. And while we can't explain it to you and write a dissertation, I could, but most parents can't sit there and say like, this is exactly how children learn and acquire information. What you know as an observer of your own individual child and how your own individual child learns and picks up information and retains information is 1,000 times more valuable than anything some student read in a book, because it's to do with your child. All those theories and all those books have to generalize. They're based on research, which is not wacky. It's real. If you're talking about like Piaget and people like that, they've done research, but some of it's really old and, they don't know your kid. And so I think parents need to have a lot more faith in themselves and their own abilities. And then too, understand that there are lots of people out there like me, and I'm small potatoes compared to what else is out there as far as professionals who can help you on this path, who have produced curriculum, who are there for consulting purposes, who are there just on a volunteer basis wanting to help you, retired educators, grandparents who've raised children and grandchildren. There are so many people out there who can help you. It's just a matter of asking. In many, many cases, it's a matter of asking. I've had grandparents write to me and say, I'd be willing to do this for my grandchildren. What do I have to do? What would I need to get started if I want to do this for my grandkids so that my kids can go off to work and do what they need to do? I live nearby. What do I do? How do I get started? That's an option if you have family nearby, so it's going to be, the solution is going to be different for each family, but I bet you that putting your head together with your partner or your friends and your family and your community, you can figure it out. If you make it a priority, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
You can certainly figure it out long enough to send a message to the public schools. That's why I say, like, when I talk about mass unenrollment, people are like, they're picturing 13 years or 5 years or 6 years. Like, they're picturing whatever they have left, like, oh my God. And I'm like, what if it were like 6 months? What if it were 6 months where you had to kitchen table it or figure it out or stick the kid on time for learning in the computer, but with enough people doing it that the school boards and the teachers unions and everybody went, oh my God, we just lost half the school district, all at once. Nothing. No amount of going to school board meetings, and especially now that they're stopping public comment, they're cutting off mics, they're having people arrested. I mean, there's no amount of fighting with an existing system that's going to be as powerful as simply not showing up to the system. Just don't show up.
Yeah.
Don't be there anymore. That is the one thing that they can't change on a dime, how they are funded. They are funded. There are multiple different ways, but they all in some way, shape, or form tie to enrollment.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the interest of me having to put my daughter to bed a half hour ago. You're good. I think it's good to sum up if you need an example of why, another reason to pull your kids out of school. The whole purpose of especially younger education is to prepare your kids for the real world. And as you can see by what I just listed out, the comments directly from the two largest teacher unions in the nation, that's not their priority. That's all I need to know about them is they're no longer prioritizing actual education, actually preparing young minds for the real world or for actual objective reality. They're preparing them for their reality.
Well, that's I'm so glad you said that. And it's a great place to finish because one of the things that came out when the NEA stuff came out that you pointed out is they also removed from their website a 2019 motion that failed. Okay. Which was to put learning number one. So in other words, that somebody had proposed, like, let's make learning and skills and whatever the number one priority of our union. It was defeated. And it was still on the website as part of the record that there was this thing that read like how you and I would like it to read, that this will be our number one priority. And it said defeated. And up until I think yesterday, it was still there. And some people still have screen grabs of it. I think maybe Chris Rufo or somebody has a screen grab. It is now gone. It's gone. You have to go look for screen grabs of it. So that's really the point. What Kevin just said is the point, that their priorities and your priorities are not even close to the same thing. Okay. So that's, and now you got to go put your daughter to bed.
Hopefully she's sleeping somewhere in the
house. Real quick, let's just say, Patrice, depends what your goal is. A viable option. Do I think it's possible to get that passed on a case-by-case basis? I suppose it's possible. It's theoretically possible to get teachers unions banned from a state. All these things are theoretically possible. I think you have to think about what is the goal. If you have a camera, you're still just like with a police camera, you're still dealing with something that's an after action situation. So something has to happen and something has to get reported, and then you have to go back and get the footage, and now you're doing damage control. When you're talking about your child's mind and learning, I would like to think we don't want to do We don't want to do after action stuff, ideally.
I've answered this question before, and the way I answered it is good police officers always want a body cam on them.
Yeah.
So they can prove that they're doing good work.
Correct.
I think if there's going to be a huge pushback of teachers saying we don't want them on them, that's already your first red flag there.
Of course. Yeah. But I don't think you're going to get a situation where you're going to be able to tune into TV, like watch the teacher. I don't think that's going to occur. If you get it passed, it's probably going to be a for the record kind of situation where if there's an issue, we'll go back and we'll look at the video.
Yeah.
That's what I think is going to happen. So, and if it even comes up. But Kevin, I thank you for devoting all of this time, and thank you for indulging me in my little rant and not like cutting me off.
Well, at least I got to kind of mark down I want to mark down where I can edit out those clips. I was scared. I was about to crack open a beer and being like, all right, let's watch this. But I always make the little clips at the end, so I'm gonna have to clip that part out and just it's gonna be Deb Destroys. That's all I'm gonna label it as.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I do get a little hot under the collar, but I hope people take it as I actually really do care a lot about this. And I do get frustrated when people are like, but you don't do that. And it's like, you want to go tell people they don't have solutions. Go tell the people in the schools. So anyway, but thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening. And we will catch you next month.
Yeah. Right. Thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot.